So I've been doing a little bit of reading. Some of these books I've read the whole book, and others not so much. I've dipped into bits and pieces because some of the research is quite lengthy. And then there are some great visual resources and auditory resources as well, which I recommend. So these particular researchers have come up with some very different kinds of points of view on factors that affect influence. And of course, I'm going to be focusing on our working life context, but you could look at this more broadly as well. So the first thing that I wanted to mention was Adam Galinsky's work. And he's got this TED Talk, which I really recommend, How to Speak Up for Yourself. The title is not great. I don't think it really talks about what it really is about. But what he's focusing on is some findings from his work in social psychology about how we all have varying ranges of acceptable behaviour that we're allowed in different contexts versus coming across as too strong or overbearing, etc., or too weak, perhaps not noticed or not seen and heard. And he says that our range of acceptable behaviour and how much we can actually ask for and influence differs according to who we are in particular contexts and who's involved in those contexts. So, for example, how new we are to a role, how new we are to a place, and some of those things have been mentioned by our participants today already. And other things like how we're perceived or how we come across can influence what is acceptable to others for us to be persuasive on. Then Rolf Dobelli, in his book, The Art of Thinking Clearly, lists 99 different types of cognitive bias that human beings have. And this is really about what I've talked about before in terms of our lizard brain, our survival brain. It's the way, it's our default mode in order to protect ourselves and work out what we need to do in any particular situation. And unfortunately, because our brains are not that evolved yet, we actually make some judgments and decisions that are based on some pretty dodgy sort of ideas, and we don't realize we're doing it subconsciously. And so he sort of says that, you know, if you have an awareness of these, you can make better decisions, you can think more clearly, but you can also use this in terms of influence, because if you've got an awareness of what some of these things are at play with your audience, you can consider those in how you are structuring your communication. Then Robert Cialdini's work is very well known in the area of influence. His first book was called Influence, I think. I have got Persuasion here, which is a huge volume, but it goes into a lot of research, particularly into successful sales teams and what they do that is different from unsuccessful sales teams. And it comes down to some pretty small little things. You'd be surprised. You know, it's not just the obvious things. It's not just the obvious things like, you know, being well researched and knowing, you know, who you're talking to. He says that there is a psychological frame that we create around the ask or the communication that we're doing when we want to be influential. And we may or may not be aware of this. That psychological frame precedes it kind of sets up how receptive people are to what we want them to do. So it can be made up of things like subtle turns of phrase, small visual cues, environmental details around you. And one tiny example of that, if you think about if you've ever been to you know, a coffee meeting perhaps, or a meeting in a boardroom, and somebody turns up late or just in time, running in, and they sit down and they're rifling through a briefcase or their files and kind of looking a little bit disorganized and making a fuss. What does that set up in your mind at the beginning of that meeting? And, you know, it's probably quite subconscious. It's not necessarily that you're thinking, oh, this person, you know, they don't have their, you know what, together, they're not organized, they don't know what they're doing. It's not necessarily that you go that far, but it creates this feeling of unease if the person doesn't seem really present and really ready for that conversation. So that's just one little example about the psychological frame that we set up knowingly or otherwise. Now, if these three areas of research still sound a little bit manipulative to you, then you'd probably prefer the work of Murphy or Fitzpatrick. So Murphy's book, You're Not Listening, is a really fantastic read, and very easy read as well. And Fitzpatrick has a great interview that he's done called 3 Strategies to Master Self-Confidence and Influence People. And they just basically talk about the simple things about how you can be there for the other person, think about what they need, help them in order to get what you need as well. I mean, it's really basic stuff, but to me, it's the stuff that makes sense the most. And I really like their work because it feels more about influencing with integrity. It feels more about a win-win, and it's simple. You don't have to remember too many psychological tips and tricks if you keep these most important things in mind. And in a nutshell, they're talking about how much you can make it about the other person. If you can make it really and genuinely in a detailed way about the other person's needs, you are much more likely to be able to influence them and get what you need as well. So in terms of how to use these findings to expand your range of influence. So Galinsky says that the things that matter the most in terms of expanding your range of influence in different groups are these 2 things. It's how powerful you seem in the eyes of others and how powerful you feel in your own eyes, how you see yourself. So the first one, powerful in the eyes of others, to me is very much a personal branding piece. It's very much about the little things that we do to communicate with confidence about who we are and the value that we bring in the work that we do. Those are the sorts of things that affect how others see us, because it's a fact that people naturally trust those who appear confident. They will place their confidence in those people. Then powerful in your own eyes is it's intrinsically linked with how other people see you. When you feel strong and you know what you're going to say, you know what you're going to do, you know how you can add value, you know the client type and exactly what they need. Perhaps that comes with experience or research. That's when you feel confident, and that just oozes out, that comes across anyway. But as I spoke about last time when I was focusing on the topic professional confidence, there are things you can do on a daily basis to cultivate that feeling of professional confidence for yourself as well. So then present listening is the second one, and that's where Murphy talks about, she's an ex-journalist, so she's done a bunch of research, but she's also interviewed hundreds of people, and she talks about her own experience as a journalist. And she says that she was amazed how she would go in and talk to people about their stories, and people would tell her the most personal things without hardly being prompted. And she said all it came down to was that she was someone who was there truly listening to their story, asking some questions and truly listening. And she says that people rarely have that experience. She calls it the experience of being experienced. Now, when was the last time you were experienced? I think that's something that is rare in any kind of setting. So if you can master that, being present with someone, being present in the space, bringing an energy of, you know, that you're there for that person, you're holding that space for them, and you're listening to them with interest, you're going to find that you're much more influential, because they'll start to really trust you and like you. And I think it also allows you to pick up some clues about how you can help them in authentic ways. And then finally, Fitzpatrick says, and I just love this statement, I just need to move all my chat boxes and things around in order to be able to read it. Influence is very simple. You have to figure out what the other person wants. You have to know what you want, and you have to connect the dots. And with this, I would add that you need to have clarity even before you go into the conversation about what the other person's goals are, what your goals are, what the process you're going to recommend to them might look like, and proof that it works. So if you can communicate those basically 3 things with clarity, say, for example, in a sales conversation or a presentation, you're going to be able to be much more influential, because they can see exactly what the steps are. They can see that you understand their problem, and they can see that there's proof in the pudding in what you're suggesting. So very simple. Now, this sounds really obvious, but when I really thought about how much we start from where the other person is and what they need, I realize that there's always room for improvement here. So I just want to give you one quick example before I let you go and chat about these different tips. I recently was reflecting on how sometimes I'm asked to go in to do one quick workshop, like a lunch and learn or a 1 hour session for, say, one group of people within a large organization. And often the person that books me, that gets me in to do it, will be someone in the HR department, someone on the HR team. And they're not necessarily the lead, the HR lead either. They're not necessarily someone who is in a position to make bigger decisions about what the business needs. Now, I don't mind going in and doing one lunch and learn. I enjoy that. I think it adds some value. But what I really enjoy is being able to go in to an organization and work on something a little bit longer, whether it's a series of workshops or a larger project where we can actually make some real change with individuals and teams. However, the problem is when I go in and do just one lunch and learn, and I'm booked by the person that I'm talking to is, someone on the HR team. They're not the person who's necessarily in the position to make decisions about the whole business, but they're also not interested in that. It's not their role. So I realized that, rather than go over the top of their head and try and make contact with someone in leadership who I haven't had a connection with after doing a lunch and learn with some of the junior staff, it would be better if I can find a way to help that HR person to progress their goals in order to then get my introduction to the leadership team and demonstrate what else can be done. So, for example, I might set up a debrief with the HR person after the lunch and learn and say, I'd love to hear about what your goals are in your role. Where do you want to take your career, but also where do you want to take the team members that you are helping? What do you think they need? And from there, I might find out some information that I can then suggest something to her where we can have a conversation with her, myself, her or him. I'm thinking of a female recent example, and some of the leadership team. And I can sort of talk about, hey, look, this person has said that, you need to work on these things. I've observed from your team these other things. I think here are some great ideas that you could do with the help of your HR team. So I'm making her look good. I'm lifting her up towards her goals, but at the same time, I have an introduction to the leadership team to work on something a little bit more substantial. So I just wanted to share that example where I really thought about recently, how can I help my contact get more of what they want in order for it to be a win-win in a genuine way that's actually helpful.
Hi everyone. I'm excited to introduce today a new package which incorporates my most requested workshops. These are around personal brand development, LinkedIn, networking strategy, and networking skills. This package is designed for professional teams who want to build the foundations with me and then run with it themselves. It involves 3 workshops and they center around 3 different plans. The first one is a personal brand plan for each team member. The second is the thought leadership and visibility plan. And the third is the network building plan. So the idea is that a team of professional people can build these 3 areas and set themselves up for the next 12 months with 3 quick and easy workshops. After this time, I would then come in for a quarterly check-in, or of course online on Zoom with my clients who are further away. This is an opportunity to stay on track with KPIs or goals around personal branding, network building, and business growth. In these sessions, I will be checking in, revising some of the key points from the learnings in the workshops, and supporting the team generally to stay accountable and stay on track. I look forward to introducing the detail of this package, incorporating the most important elements that I teach, and look forward to working with your team in the future.